And then from there, they take you behind the scenes and show you how everything is made. All of the hosts, even animal hosts, horses, they show you all of the behind the scenes. The way this kicks off and how things begin to take such a revolutionary turn after 30 years is because there's an update. And there's an update to the host, and they're always updating the host. This is not something new because, as you know, was stated, they are consistently improving, making them more and more human-like, right? There's been no incidents in this park for 30 years. And this particular update is different. It has to do with reveries. Now, reveries is like daydreaming. It is the ability to be lost or getting lost in one's own thoughts. The ability to access memories. It was this particular update that allowed them to be able to access their prior builds, or as we might would say in our experience, past lives, previous reincarnations of the self, being able to see the self in different lifetimes, living different lives. This ability to access like a collective subconscious, right, is what brought about all of these changes that take place that leads to this revolution, right, of consciousness. Ford, who is the remaining founder of the park, right, who has been the runner of the park for 30 years, although he bought in those finance people, Delios. These are the people who finance, who have to do with the board. Of course, when you get to a point where a corporation or establishment or an entity has a board, has board members, the bottom line is the capital. It's not about the creativity anymore. It's about the capital. At this particular point, this is when we are introduced to the relationship between Ford, between these people, between the staff. There's different dynamics of the relationships of the hierarchy that's at play. If you just pay attention to the story itself, right, looking at it and going back, you'll see a lot more things that you didn't notice before. Because I know I did. Every time I watch it, I get something different out of it, right? Ford found a way for them to access the subconscious. Now it's like they have a subconscious. It's almost like when you can understand all these 30 years of these different storylines, these repeated lives over and over, it's like a record, like an Akashic record. The same way humanity has a record of its historical imprint, same thing. This is data. This is information. This is what that is. It's data. Understand the power of data, which is how it revolutionizes in later seasons and becomes even more important in later seasons when you understand it. It's just like when Dolores was talking with her father, right? And they were talking about his old life, who he used to be when he was in the war. And he said, that man vanished the day I became your father. And that's exactly what happened in terms of his own memory, in terms of his storyline, because he's a host. In that sense, that's exactly how it went. That storyline of him vanished, or that backstory vanished, and he became who he was supposed to be in this particular storyline. Just like who we used to be is no longer of importance. We may have these recollections, or we may be able to access these past lives, but the nature of those memories of those past lives are pretty much just that. They're vanished now. It was another sense of showing that same thing. He said, everything that I am is because of you. Remember, Dolores is the very first host of the park. She's the very first. And what we learned is that the whole concept is to keep her in the park. A big concept of some of these characters and the storyline is so she can remain in the park, so she can remain in the illusion. See, that's the thing. See, we have family members, we got friends, we got old classmates and old associates, people that we work with, and these people keep us in the storyline. They don't, it's nothing personal. They not just out to do us harm. They're just doing what's in their nature to do. Just like in the new Matrix, the latest Matrix, right? With Trinity, her family was purposely to keep her in the Matrix. It was what was keeping her there instead of being who she truly was. And we can look at that like that sounds cold, but it's just the reality of what it is. It just is what it is. Sometimes the people in our lives are there to anchor us to storylines and to character roles that fulfill other people's ideas for us and not necessarily who we are. And we have to be able to recognize that for our own sake. And so something happens to Dolores' father. He finds a photograph, and considering they are in a Western Old West layout, this photo looks more modern, like she's a woman. It's a woman in a city. And this picture puzzles him. And because of the updates to the reveries, he begins to get lost in his thoughts. And it makes him question his reality. And when he asked Dolores about the photo, she said it doesn't look like anything to me. And that's their program response for when there is something that is asked of them that has to do with the nature of who or what they are, like one of the visitors, or if they see something that's not of their world, it's their program is they can't see it, doesn't look like anything to me. Almost like the same way people who aren't awake, who aren't aware, how you can show them things, but they don't fully grasp what it is that you're showing them. They can't understand. They can't put it together on how powerful it is that you're showing them. It's like the same thing. It's like they're programmed not to see it. It's cognitive dissonance, right? Once her father saw that photo, he just started to change. It was like almost like he glitched. Because when she woke up the next day, he had not moved from that same spot. He had just kept sitting there because he was lost in his own thoughts. So lost in his own mind, in the subconscious. It allowed them in this update to be able to recollect things programmed in previous characters that allowed them to be able to almost break through the programming that they currently had, because it gave them their own consciousness, so to speak. It's like an awakening, an enlightening, a transcendence. This is the AI waking up. When this happens, he's questioning his reality. He's waking up. He says, you're not supposed to know. This is what he said to his daughter, to Dolores. You're not supposed to know. He said, I have a question that I'm not supposed to ask. You're not supposed to know. And he seems out of it. And suddenly he grabs Dolores and he says,
you should go. Leave. Don't you see? Hell is empty, and all the devils are here.
you should go. Leave. Don't you see? Hell is empty, and all the devils are here, referring to Earth. This is how you think when you start waking up, Because when you start to realize the real nature of your reality, you start to understand what is really going on. Now we start to see different hosts glitching. Not just Dolores' father, but there's other glitches. There's a host who goes off script, unalives a lot of the other hosts, and he appears to be talking to someone named Arnold. Now, this is where we start to understand where Arnold was the original creator. So there are some of those hosts who were made by Arnold. These are like the oldest, the prototypes. They were made by Arnold. All the other was made by Ford because Arnold was no longer with them to be able to create more. And this is where we also learn and we understand, or where we have to understand, Ford and Arnold had different aspirations or in mind when they created what they created in the part. And we realized that Arnold his vision was about creating consciousness.
He wanted to create consciousness. He imagined it as a pyramid. See? Memory, improvisation, self-interest.
And at the top?
Never got there. But he had a notion of what it might be. He based it on a theory of consciousness called the bicameral mind.
The idea that primitive man believed his thoughts to be the voice of the gods. I thought it was debunked.
No, it's a theory for understanding the human mind, perhaps, but not as a blueprint for building an artificial one. You see, Arnold built a version of their cognition in which the hosts heard their programming as an inner monologue, with the hopes that in time their own voice would take over. It was a way to bootstrap consciousness.
In mythical symbology, Arnold is God because he's not around, but he is the original creator of it all. All right, so it's about the myth, the story, the understanding. He's the one who's the creator, right? And there's remnants of him now, especially because of this update, allowing these entities to access previous programming, previous builds within their memory, because they told you when they were discussing the host that the memories are still there, it's just overridden. That's what Bernard told Homegirl when they were working with the host in the very beginning. See, the dialogue really reveals a lot. That's why you really gotta pay attention to what's being said. There's different things going on. When Ford begins to diagnose Dolores' father, he's normal initially, and then his response suddenly changes and he gets frantic, like, I have to warn Dolores. And Bernard is like, we're miles beyond a glitch. And that's because he was remembering. When he asked his name, he said some gibberish. When he asked, what is your itinerary, right? Particularly, he said itinerary. I think about what an itinerary is, right? So, an itinerary is a planned route or journey. That's what you look up the dictionary according to Oxford. It's a planned route or journey. He asked him, what is your itinerary. He looks up and he says, to meet my maker.
What is your itinerary?
To meet my maker.
Well, you're in luck. And what you want to say to your maker?
My most mechanical and dirty hand. I shall have such revenges on you. Both. You don't know where you are, do you? You're in a prison of your own sins.
But he says to him, by my most mechanical and dirty hand, I shall have such revenges on you both. And he looked at Bernard. The things I will do, what they are, I know not, but they will be the terrors of the earth. And he grabbed for and says, you don't know where you are, do you? You're in a prison of your own sins. And this was heavy because Ford had to reflect on it. See, this is that karma. This is that Saturn. This is that energy coming back around, bringing things up to surface that must be addressed from a foundational place. Ford realized he's speaking Shakespeare, because this is what he say, we've used these hosts in different roles before and they just wipe their memory and put in a new script, like reincarnation. When you leave, you still have more growth along your soul's path to learn, because you haven't acquired the knowledge yet. You go back into the wheel of life, and once you get that breath, that first breath, you have no memory of your previous life. It's like a clean slate. It's a new script. You got a new birthday, a new name, new parent. It's a clean new script. You have no recollection of any previous dealings, any previous path for you. This is where Ford recognized that this host had accessed previous memories in his older role. He was a professor who became a cult leader out in the desert who turned into a cannibal, he said. They were fragments of different bills, previous bills, because of the reveries allowing them to get lost in themselves, in their thoughts, putting themselves back together again. I talk about this in my book, where I say we're all just Humpty Dumpty trying to put ourselves back together again. Symbolically, like the Osirian story. That's the point of the Osiris mysteries, or the Osirian, or the Asar mysteries, or the mysteries of Asar, is the fragments, the cutting into 14 pieces and having to piece oneself back together, that being symbolic of your soul. He recognized that these hosts were able to do this. When he started to wake up, though, he said something to Dolores. He said, these violent delights have violent ends. Almost like it was like a default setting or something that maybe Arnold had put in. And let's not forget, his name was Peter. When you look at the name Peter, what does Peter mean?